Seven, six, five, four, three, two, one.
You'll never have the sacred stone.
Oh, this you crazy mother.
Welcome to the Henry Huzzy Coaching YouTube channel and podcast, where we discuss everything physique and lifestyle related, as well as the science of getting jacked. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Henry Huzzy Coaching. I am Henry Huzzy. This evening we are running Chat with Coach, but we are talking with Dr. Mike Israetel. For those of you who do not know, Dr. Mike is the head science consultant for Renaissance Periodization. He has his PhD in exercise science from East Tennessee State University. He is an SSJ2, which is an Ascended Super Saiyan. He is a pro at analogies. He's also a competitive bodybuilder who was recently competed in the last year, an old school competitive raw power lifter as well, and an all-around pretty good sciencey guy to talk to. How's that for a shrill job there? Good?
Some of those are just extreme exaggerations, but I'll take them.
You know what? You're pretty much a pro in analogies. I do enjoy a lot of your analogies.
Well, thanks so much. I'm also, to be clear, Super Saiyan 4 at this point. So,
oh, sorry.
Your data is old, and it would result in your power meter blowing up next to your face, and you dropping to your knees and shocked because of my unbelievable power level.
Fair enough. Yeah, you're well past 9,000 at this point.
Oh my God.
So, Dr. Mike, basically what we wanted to talk to you today, as I mentioned to you before we came on the air, show prep in Newfoundland, where I'm from, is pretty much almost halfway there for a lot of people. As of not this weekend, the weekend after, I'll be 8 weeks out from show. A lot of people will be in their 16-week-ish to 20-week-ish prep zone. So I'd like to talk a lot about different styles of prep, diets, things during prep that I can bring in, and just some general questions as well.
Totally, that sounds great. What are these shows are mostly, October, November then?
Yeah, so generally ours last year was November the 27th. We also had a show in May, but this year it's November the 11th, which is Remembrance Day. Should be a good show. Like I said, it's my third one going in, and I think this one is the one I'm actually prepared for. It's been a huge learning curve over the last couple of years.
It always is.
Yeah, right. So first and foremost, I want to talk about crash dieting, because it's something that I see a lot happening here. Is something that I've learned over the last while is, in order to come in the best or the best at stage, you can't really take that approach a lot of the time. People needing to lose, upwards of 40, 50 pounds to get on stage. What do you think defines a crash diet first?
Sure. Do you want me to speak in pounds or kilos? Because I can do both.
Pounds. Most people here use pounds.
Weird.
Yeah.
Okay, so, not weird to me. Shit, we live in the States, so pounds all we know.
Right.
Crash dieting is basically the prioritizing of diet speed as far as amount of weight lost per week, vastly in disproportion to other qualities of dieting, particularly conservation of muscle mass, conservation of sanity, probability of reducing a nasty rebound, and all of those other factors. So what you end up doing with crash dieting is, if you successfully pull it off, you lose a shitload of weight. The problem is you're not as muscular at the end as you could have been. The diet is psychologically much more taxing than it should have been, which can lead to a lot of problems down the road. And you set yourself up for a nasty, nasty rebound at the end of the diet, which can mean that even your next prep is affected by something you're no longer even doing. So a crash diet can potentiate another crash diet because you balloon another 40 or 50 pounds.
Yeah, I was not aware of that. I read Lyle's work on crash dieting a couple of times just to go over it. And, even the extremes he would suggest was, this would last only 2 or 3 weeks at most. And I know Eric Helms writes some stuff as well on losing weight quicker. And even his recommendations is, very slow, very short periods of time. And it's 2% body weight max. So, it probably wouldn't be best to start a prep in, such a phase. And I know you've talked to it before that It would be, oh geez, I lost my train of thought there.
No worries. I think I know where you're going with this. So, the real thing about prep, and this is an analogy that Shelby Starnes has used and possibly invented, is it's like landing an airplane. Undershooting the runway is just as bad as overshooting the runway. And another thing is that the slower you diet on average, the less interfering the process is with all of the good things that we want from dieting, and the less likely it is to cause all of the bad things. Mm-hmm. But a big issue people have is patience. I think one of the reasons that crash dieting occurs is obviously when people just start prep too late, right? I mean, you gotta get in shape and you only have 10 weeks, it's time to do something or not. Mm. So I think the way to solve that problem is sometimes you just got to sit a show out or sit out a season. You want to kind of start prep, but maybe let's say your wife had a kid or you got a new dog or you got a new job and you were training really well during that transitional, let's say 8 weeks for your new work, but your diet was just, like maintenance diet. And then you're like, oh shit, it's September and I got shows in October. Time to get lean and you're way too late. I think the intelligent decision at that juncture is to say, okay, well, clearly I just have to skip these shows. I'm going to be ready for next February, next May, or whatever, but this is stupid because it's just going to get me fucked over. I think there's another category of thing that pushes people into crash dieting, and here it is. People who don't have the patience to incrementally look better and better week to week, especially in the last 10 weeks. For them, when they're 2 months out, they want to look stage ready already. Mm. And what they'll do is they'll have a logical diet, let's say 20 weeks to lose 25 or 30 pounds, which is totally cool. But what they'll do is they'll lose the first 20 pounds in the first 8 weeks just to be like, oh, I need to be in fucking shape. I need to do it. Then what happens is they have, 12 weeks left. They're pretty lean, but they're so burnt out in so many different physiological and psychological ways that the question is, so now what are you going to do with the rest of the 8 weeks? And they're like, well, kind of work on details. And the thing is that you don't want to hang out at low body fats like that after a diet for that long. Mm-hmm. You're going to pay the price. So I think a lot of people, when they go week to week on a steady diet plan and they see small changes, they freak out and go, damn it, I'm never going to be in shape at this rate. Whereas mathematically, of course they are. But they freak out and go, why don't I just get super lean and then I'll just maintain? That's a lot easier said than done, and it's just not a very good idea.
I agree 100%. In fact, I started this year, I felt very lean. In fact, I was almost as lean on stage last year as I was when I started prep this year. I finished a mini cut. I went from 198 to 187, 188. It was around that area. I did a maintenance phase for 6 weeks. Up my food, did a little bit of training, didn't go crazy with it, and that's where I started training this year. So I had a full six-pack. I was ready to go at 16 weeks out, which has been very, very successful for me so far, because I remember last year I was playing catch-up the last 4 weeks, and it made my life a living hell.
Totally.
Right? And it was just one of those things that, it takes a lot of stress on the body and just stress on your work and everything like that. And it was just like, go, do more cardio, do this, do that. And I think that's where I learned my biggest lesson in prep from last year, what not to do. And what I wanted to avoid this year, that was exactly what I did to avoid that.
Yeah. And that's a very good point, and there's always, as with almost all points, there's the opposite that you are not doing, but you could be. And the opposite recourse is to get in shape way too soon and kind of do fuck all for 16 weeks. So imagine that if you're already in contest shape 16 weeks out or whatever, I mean, you're just purposelessly shutting down testosterone production and doing everything else bad about being, way too lean for too long. And why, right? So there's a happy middle ground where you start out lean enough so that you're well on time, you don't have to rush, but not get so paranoid that you screw up your mass phase beforehand, cut it short, not put on any muscle, and then just stay lean for forever and just coast into the show. My personal preference, and I have yet to actually perfect this in my own abilities, but I have consulted a variety of people who pull this off super well. I think it's a good idea to plan to be in contest shape about 2 to 4 weeks preferably 4 weeks before your show. Like, if they just announced that the show is 3 weeks earlier, you'd be like, I'm good. That way you get to 4 weeks out, you can actually start bumping up the food a little bit, reducing the cardio a little bit, fill out a little bit. You're going to look freaky as hell, which is great for taking pictures and promoting yourself, but you're going to look great, and you can really start to play around with carbs and workouts and things like that to find where your best look is. And just in case, because you plan that 4 weeks, just in case if it doesn't work out and you still have extra fat to lose, then you have 4 weeks in which to do it. I mean, imagine you getting down. I've been through this situation. I've seen it hundreds of times. Somebody gets to a week before the show, and they really just have 2% more fat to lose. You're not going to lose that shit a week before the show. It's just not going to happen. And if you try, you're going to come in so flat, no one's going to notice that you lost the extra body fat. But if you are 4 weeks out and you realize, ooh, I need to be 2% leaner, shit, you got 4 weeks. You're good to go. So I think shooting the 4 weeks out mark is a really, really good idea, and that doesn't require a crazy, way too long of a diet, nor is it a crazy, diet to, race to the end of nowhere kind of thing.
100%, and this is exactly where I have myself planned as well this year. As I mentioned, we're 9.5. In fact, I just had a diet break last week of eating at maintenance, which I would like to talk about a little bit now, actually, which is something that I picked up from Steve, and I decided to give it a try this year, and I did it during my deload. I decided to eat at maintenance just for a week while I took my deload, and I've really found it interesting because I was starting the dieting on 2,750 calories, and I stuck at that. I was steady weight loss. It was perfect, but as I noticed as I hit my mesocycle, as I was just basically into my overreaching week, the hunger became an issue. And it was, I have not done any cardio yet. I haven't had the need to. My weight loss is becoming very steadily, and my hunger just went crazy to the point that I was like, okay, this is mentally taxing now. I work in a restaurant in the evenings.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so there's always bread, there's always chocolate, there's always all this stuff around it's very difficult to, when you're hungry, if it's there, you'd like to take it. So at this point I said, okay, I'm really going to give this diet break thing a try. And some things I noticed over the first week were the first 2 days I was eating at maintenance, I was still ravenous. The first 2 days I was eating 3,250 calories and I was ravenous. The first couple of days my body weight obviously just went right up. But I was expecting this, did not worry it whatsoever. Supercompensation of glycogen, etc., and water weight from more salt. And as day 3 went on, it slowly started to drop off. And then day 4, it was a little bit less. Day 5 was the first day after eating at maintenance calories that I wasn't really hungry after my second meal. In fact, the first 2 days, I was still starving after the end. And it came to the point that I was like, maybe I cut my calories a little too low at first, 2,750. I should have lowered it a little bit more. But yeah, it was really interesting to see that because after 5 days being back on deficit again, my weight is completely normalized and I'm back to exactly where I was when I was ending off before.
And how is your hunger now?
It's non-existent. In fact,
oh wow,
yeah, it was very, very powerful for me. In fact, at this point right now, I can go hours without eating and it isn't bothering me. In fact, I was too full last night because I transitioned at one point now from a lot of rice and things like that down to more coniferous vegetables. I'm eating a lot of turnip, more broccoli, so I'm feeling more full. I actually had to stuff myself last night with my last bit of food I had, and I was like, I'm just going to get this in because I need it. I don't want to leave it, right? So it was at that point. So the reason I want to talk about this more, with the science side of it, is I've been getting barraged with questions locally. A diet break is something that is completely unheard of where I'm from. It's been kind of crazy. So
okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, go on.
Yeah, but that's it. I'd just like to talk about some of the reasons that someone would take a diet break besides what I've just explained.
Sure. Well, so I think the number one reason for a diet break is that your body is really good at detecting chronic hunger and pushing all of its physio and psychological mechanisms towards rectifying that situation. One of the most profound evolutionary pressures selective pressures in our evolution was, intermittent starvation. And our psychology is incredibly well attuned to making sure that we don't go hungry for too long. It is similarly attuned to, for example, driving sex drive. Right? There's only so long you can keep single men and women in the same room until shit's going to go down, right? Because it's just a drive that builds. It is perfected by evolution over literally, for sex drive, it's however long there's been, sexually reproducing organisms, which is something to the tune of over 500 million years. I mean, that long of a time, you get good at that. Next question is, how long has food seeking been a psychological mainstay? I mean, longer. We didn't even have brains at that point yet, but forever, right? So when you are dieting, it can get really, really tough to try to fight these completely ancestral, super powerful urges. It's like fighting the urge to breathe. It's that hard. So what do you have to do is logically recognize that momentum of hunger will grow on a hypocaloric diet, and you need to basically trick your brain / body into thinking, okay, we're not actually starving. How do you do that? Well, you periodically reintroduce higher amounts of food. I mean, the first way to do that is just not cut a huge deficit to begin with, because then your body's kind of like, am I starving? Maybe not. I don't know. I still have the same amount of muscle mass. Protein is high. My vitamin and mineral intake is normal. It doesn't seem like I'm really starving, because if your protein is low and your vitamin and mineral intake is low, you're just going to go into actual starvation and just eat everything. So doing a good job dieting is good, but then another big factor is basically taking a week. My favorite kind of diet breaks are actually a little bit longer than that, and really returning back to an isocaloric diet so that the body, through its mostly through manipulation and detection of hormones, can kind of check and recheck and go, okay, are we starving? Yes. Okay, elevate hormone levels that drive us insane and make us hungry. Are we starving? Yes. Repeat process. Then for a couple of days, the checklist goes to no. Are we starving? No. Don't tell the hormones anything. 2 days later, are we starving? No. Reduce hormone production. There's no reason that we should be seeking food, because we clearly have it. And then after a week or so, my favorite is to do 2 to 4 weeks of diet breaks, but go for longer between them. And that's a very moot point. It's not, I'm not going to, unless you really want me to, I'm not even going to bother defending that as to why. The principles are all the same. It's like people who ask me, like, should I lift at 60% 1RM or 65? I'm like, Jesus Christ, why is that relevant? Yeah, for real. So it's sets of 8 better or sets of 10? Like, oh my God. But so that diet break basically takes all of the hormonal systems of the body that have gone into flux and calms them and brings them back down and buys you time. Now, inevitably, several weeks later, it's going to happen again. And then, hypothetically, you would have a diet break programmed, and then you cool the waters again. Now, the thing is, can you continue to do that? No, because there are some longer-running hormones that take months to accumulate and take a very serious months to reduce back in activity. But that's just part of prep, right?
Yeah.
So are you ever going to return back to completely normal hunger levels during your prep? You're not. Are you going to go to, at the end of your prep, the week before you show, are you still going to be sane and survivable? Yes, totally, if you manage those elements properly. And if you're trying to explain to individuals the logic behind these things through analogy, here we go, king of analogies coming up, right? The analogy of the weekend to the work week is a really good one, I mean, if you want to get a project done at work and do your best job, does that mean you just don't take weekends for 2 months straight? I mean, your work's going to be pure shit. You're just going to be seeing red all the time. You have no idea what's going on. You need to refresh. I mean, that's why they have the weekend. When people think, the weekend is a labor movement thing, it's, because, corporations used to exploit everyone. And it was true a little bit more in the 1900s. But nowadays, if the weekend just became not even government enforceable, I mean, there's a variety of jobs now in a modern economy is Canada is actually one of the freest economies in the world. It's one of the less regulated. But there's nobody really saying to most workers, unless they're shift workers, you have to take weekends. Most corporations could easily just ask you to work all the time, but they don't. Why? Because they know you'll go insane and start making shit work. So they know that idea that if you work super hard for 5 days, but then for 2 days you take it easy, is sustainable. But remember, again, analogy works really well because it's not infinitely sustainable. Every couple of months, you need to go on vacation for a week or two to really cool the waters, completely reduce everything. And that is something only a long maintenance phase of maybe 8 weeks or a massing phase after your show. That's what that can do. But the shorter diet breaks of a week to 2 weeks during your prep can make sure that those at least medium-term hormones get pushed back down when they get climbing too far.
Do you think that by taking periodic diet breaks, I have another one planned for later into my prep, do you think that will lower the amount of like long-term hunger I will feel instead of going 16 weeks straight, like breaking it up into, 2 diet breaks and then, go to a recovery diet at the end? Do you think it will reduce the amount of hunger or the longer I will have to feel hungry at the end? Do you think that's possible?
Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. And my best guess would be no, but I might be wrong. I think it'll just make the diet itself easier. It might make the final recovery. I think the final recovery has a lot more to do with how much total weight you lost than it does with the rapidity with which you lose it. But I think the rapidity does play a role. But then we're talking about so if you lose weight over the course of 4 months, you lose 10 kilos pounds, 16 pounds, let's say, versus if you do it over if you do it over 2 months, then the 4 months is easier on you psychologically, hormonally, etc. In some ways. But here with diet breaks, we're really comparing 16 weeks to like 19 weeks. It's not a huge difference. So the number one reason we do diet breaks is to make the actual diet itself easier. At the end, you're still going to be pretty well fucked. So my advice to you as a competitor, expect to be pretty psychologically messed up at the end of the diet anyway. But hey, that's a lot better. You might get just as psychologically messed up at the end of the diet as you would have otherwise. But that's the difference between getting psychologically messed up only at week T-2 versus at week T-9 and being that fucked up for that entire time. It's a big difference, and it's going to make your prep go a lot better. One thing that I want to mention that's popped up into my head a little bit ago is for individuals that are very resistant to this diet break idea, because I just want to get it done. Once I'm in the zone, hardcore, that kind of thing, which, it has its merits. There's a really good series of arguments against it. Here's just one of them as a sample. One of the characteristics of high levels of hunger is an increased secretion of cortisol, because hunger makes you stressed out. And if it doesn't directly make you stressed out, which it does, by the way, it'll make you stressed out when your hungered self interacts with regular life. Cindy at your restaurant drops a plate of food, and she's like, "Oh my God, can you get that? Sorry, I got to get more food for the customer." You're going to be like, "Jesus Christ, I'm going to fucking murder you outside of this parking lot." I mean, maybe you don't think that in your heart of hearts, whatever, right? Cortisol will be higher through the whole diet if you're hungrier than if you're not.
Okay.
Next question. Cortisol, what does it do? Well, it physiologically breaks down muscle and increases fatigue and reduces your preparedness. It also interferes to some extent with fat burning. Hunger is not just a mental thing. It's not like if I'm hungry and if I just got through it, I'll still be lean and I'll still get the same great results. False. If you manage to control your hunger through a variety of strategies like eating more protein, eating more veggies, biasing your food intakes to times of the day in which you tend to be hungry, managing your sleep, doing diet breaks, if you do all that correctly, you actually, as a sum total of amount of hormone over your whole prep, secrete less cortisol. And guess what? Cortisol is catabolic hormone. You just now took your level of catabolism and dropped it to here. And if your level of anabolism is typically here, you have a better anabolic-catabolic ratio. You're just going to plain old be bigger, leaner, and better looking on stage. And you know that, like, even if you maintained a certain decent level of size and you got lean, if even in your last week, if you were super stressed out for a long time, even your last week isn't enough to reduce cortisol levels completely, you tend to have a waterlogged, stringy look on stage. You ever see competitors and you look at them, you're like, you just look fucking tired, bro. And they're like, I am fucking tired. Bags under your eyes, especially in physique. They want to see a paragon of health, not exactly like, Willem Dafoe lookalike contest, which would be an interesting contest.
Skeletor face, yeah.
Exactly. So I think Skeletor looks at Willem Dafoe and he's like, damn, I thought I looked like a fucking holy shit. So that sort of situation is mitigated by anti-hunger strategies. So I think that it's, people say like, you know what, I'm just going to gut through it. Like, you don't want to gut through it. That's the thing, is that there's a physiology you don't control. Another really quick thing while I'm ranting, maybe your viewers will find this part entertaining. There is a misperception about the hardcore nature of sport preparation that invades almost every sport and it's taken for granted. And I might actually write a fucking article about this at some point because it's pissing me off. Have you ever seen the movie Lionheart with Jean-Claude Van Damme by any chance?
I have. I just can't recall it.
That's probably for the best. But so in any case, it illustrates this idea that so he's a fighter and he's preparing for a big fight. And this, one of his sponsors invites him to live at this really fancy kind of palace of a home with all the amenities. And he goes, no, I'm going to have my own apartment. It's just going to be basic. I need it simple. This place is too soft for me, too easy. And it's like, okay, what is he saying in a technical sense? That the amount of total recovery strategy application will be too high at this fancy home and thus somehow soften them up? That's bullshit. That's backwards. What is the most ideal situation? It is training like a fucking wild animal and recovering like the laziest Sultan of Brunei you've ever seen in the world. Hookers, marijuana, gourmet food, saunas, or whatever the fuck else you relax with, just more or less hookers. Just hookers all day long, 80 hookers touching you at various portions all the time. Typical day in Newfoundland, right? So basically, you want the most softness. You want the most ease in your recovery. People conflate specific intensity and specific suffering that is good versus a generalized air of intensity and suffering through prep that is not good. So the ideal prep pushes the diet as hard as it can, pushes the training as hard as it can, but the rest of it, the recovery modalities, how you're managing hunger, how much sleep you're getting, how much relaxation you're getting, how stressful is your job, should be kept as good as possible. Does that make sense? You want
100%.
to live in the palace and train in the dungeon, not the other way around. You certainly, people, say, okay, train in the dungeon. That means I fucking live in the dungeon, bro. You know those old Animal ads from back in the 90s? The guy sitting in his shitty fucking bed and he's like, I don't give a fuck about life. Fuck life. I don't pay my rent. And it's like, if you had a more comfortable bed and your neighbors weren't banging all the time, you could probably get more sleep and have even better workouts. So I think that whole anti-hunger thing, I think that you'll find some resistance from people to be like, whatever, I don't give a fuck about hunger. You're like, you should, and you're not a pussy for doing it. The real question if you're a pussy or not is, do you execute the plan and how hard are you training? Now, the more you rest and the lower hunger you have, the harder you train. Win-win.
100%. That just makes a boatload of sense, and you're right, the viewers will greatly enjoy that. Which takes me to another thing that a lot of people don't utilize here are deloads at all during contest prep. Now, for myself, I mentioned to you I usually do a 4-on and then a deload. That's usually what I find works very well for me. But during contest prep, I decided to, ramp up the volume a little bit slower and have a really good overreaching week. So I did it for 6 weeks this time. So at this point, like I said, my hunger was crazy at that point. My sleep was starting to get a little bit off. And some other things were starting to get affected. But a lot of people that I see, they just 16 weeks, hard as possible, do it, just work your ass off. And, I just would like to explain to those people that are watching, the purpose of what I'm doing, the deload. And it's really interesting because my diet so far has been very successful, as I mentioned. But when I came back after deload and a maintenance phase, I hit an incline dumbbell press PR for the amount of reps I did. And it's it was fantastic. It was only an extra 5 pounds for 2 reps, but I'll take it. You know what I mean?
That's really good, man.
Well, I'll take it. I was very, very happy. I was there with a couple of other physique competitors, and I was first time training with either of them, super motivated, and it was fantastic. Yeah. So I'd like to
awesome.
talk about the benefits of deloading, especially during contest prep.
So the purpose of deloading is to bring down fatigue. As we do overloading training, we get good things, adaptations, and we get bad things, fatigue. Glycogen levels drop. You have micro tears in the musculature. The nervous system gets frayed and tired and less effective. Hormonal situations are in flux, so you start to get a higher production of cortisol and a lower production of testosterone if you do overloading training for long enough. Jesus, I don't even know what the... fuck, I'm dying over here. I have some shit in my throat. You know how like you have like a tickle in your throat and you just have to cough for forever?
Yeah, please don't die on my YouTube channel.
That would be pretty sweet though, right?
Terrible. Well, you
Hey,
know,
it's
I
gonna
get
get
a lot
you
of media
views.
attention.
There you go. You just fucking, all you got to do is as soon as I die on your show, you just got to like take off using that. Be like, just promote the shit out of it. You can have ads running of me dying, like little snippets. It's going to be great. So, so that fatigue rises, and pretty soon it does two fundamental things. It does a couple of other things, two fundamental things. One is it prevents the application of overload. So you are so tired, your physiology is so inept at producing high forces and high volumes that you can't train harder. The problem with that is that as you are losing fat and you're hypocaloric, it is the training harder and harder that is keeping your muscle on your fucking body.
Mm-hmm.
So after a while, because you cannot challenge your body anymore, and you know that whole, not principle, but little euphemism, if you don't use it, you lose it. Well, if you're not challenging your body, it's going to be like, why the fuck do we need this muscle? It's going to start sloughing it off, right? So imagine you did, 10 sets of 10 in the squat at, 315 pounds a month ago, and now you're so tired you can only do, 8 sets of 10 at 295. Do you really think that maintaining that sort of decline is going to allow you to be more muscular? Of course not. You're going to start losing muscle after a while. That's the bad part. The worst part is that at a physiological, biochemical level, high levels of fatigue promote the kind of molecular mechanisms that are directly catabolic and downregulate directly anabolic mechanisms. High levels of fatigue drop the activity of muscle protein synthesis, mTOR mediated, and raise AMP kinase activity that literally just tells muscle to break itself down for energy. That's a bad deal. It doesn't matter how hard you work. It doesn't matter how much you want it. After multiple weeks, for intermediate to advanced competitors, certainly after 8 weeks, if not sooner, you're going to start getting a relative balance of AMPK and mTOR activity, of anabolic and catabolic regulation. After that, the balance is going to be shifted to catabolic. You're just going to start pissing away muscle. Even if by some miracle of drugs or pre-workout you can still train super hard. But you probably won't be doing that either. So the better idea is this: periodically take a week of deloading, lower volumes especially, and to some extent lower intensities. Let all that fatigue drop down. Eat an isocaloric diet, which does two things. First of all, it accomplishes this anti-hunger effect, and also it allows you to really use that extra food to recover, reduce that fatigue. Then, so your fatigue goes up and up and up and up and up and up, and you take a deload, it goes back down almost all the way to where it was at the beginning, and then you just bought yourself an extra 6 weeks of slow increments. Now, of course, how much you sleep, how good your nutrition is, how intelligent your training is, can be the difference between your fatigue rising like this or rising like that, but it still rises either way, especially in a hypocaloric diet. So a deload periodically allows you to bring that fatigue down so that you can buy yourself, it's like an investment. It's like going, let's say, well, fuck it, we'll just keep the sexual analogies. I hope you don't, but is your audience like a family-oriented audience?
I certainly hope not.
Right on. You're like, I have nothing to offer these people. So, how do they say fun at a strip club, right? I've actually been to a strip club like 2 times and it was awful. But in any case, hypothetical fun at a strip club. You have to have fucking money, right? So you use money, the strippers do shit, and you're like, this is great. But then periodically you run out of money. So what do? You run out to the ATM, right? And you put money, or you put your credit card in and it gives you money, and then you go back and have fun. Now, are you having fun while running out of the club to the ATM? No, there's no titties on your face then. That's not great. Just like during a deload, you're not training hard, you're not getting pumps. Your show's coming up, and you're pissed because you're not making any fucking gains or you're not losing any fat. It's also that feeling of like, when you're pumped or when you're tired in the gym, you're like, yes, I'm working towards something. You don't feel like that in a deload. You're like, what the fuck am I doing? I'm buying time. It's like a really big project is due at work in 3 weeks, but you have a fucking weekend away with, with somebody like down south or something having a fun time. You're like, why the fuck am I here? The reason you're there, right? That's to get that $100 or $200, or if you're a high roller, a little bit more than that, come back and spend it on more strippers, right? You're buying yourself the ability to have an hour or 2 hours, or in my case, 37.5 seconds, which is my PR, more fun, right? That was a premature ejaculation joke, by the way, for those that missed it.
Oh, I got it.
Excellent. My man, one of us, huh? I see. So essentially, you're buying yourself more time. So a deload, what that allows you to do is buy yourself 4 or 6 weeks, depending on how you dope it out, of quality anti-catabolic training that brings you in better at the end. And here's the deal. Does that mean that if you want the same total amount of hard training time that you have to lengthen your prep? So if you're going to have 3 deloads during prep, does that mean the prep, instead of being 14 weeks, should be 17 weeks to make room for the deloads? Yes. But on the net balance, that's a way better trade-off than trying to bull rush 14 weeks straight. And I'll tell you one more thing before I stop ranting and let you ask me a fucking question finally. The people that say I don't deload, they don't formally. They auto-deload, which is worse. So what they do is pull-ups get hard, so they switch to lat pull-downs. Or they switch to bullshit isolation exercises. I'm fucking carving in details, bro. You can literally see bodybuilders being like, man, squats are hard on contest prep, so I switched to leg presses. Great. You're now saving less muscle because the exercise isn't as full body. It's not as taxing. So people will auto-deload, and in this unplanned fashion, they don't get the benefits of this planned progression, and thus they kind of just lose some muscle the entire time, and they manage to survive it. It's a poor strategy. It doesn't work optimally. It's kind of like, here's another, you should have never called me in the analogies because now I'm just exploding with the shit. Let's say we have a super advanced tracker hunting down a criminal. The criminal is just a mindless asshole, and he's got his jail uniform on, and he's running through the woods towards like the river where he's home free. The river's like 4 days away. He's just gonna run the entire fucking time, tear his clothes, bleed on the bushes, slip on a rock, hurt his ankle because he just keeps running for it one fucking direction. He's like, if I make it to that river, I'm gonna be good. What does the expert tracker do? He brings his fucking tent. He brings a can of beans. He rests every 12 hours. And his tracker assistant with him, who's learning the trade, isn't like, that guy's going to be at the river like soon. Shouldn't we be going? Be like, no, you dumb asshole, because we're going to be going at a much faster pace, much healthier. And then what does he do? He ends up routing the guy and meeting him right in front of the river, healthy, well as can be, perfect aim, pointing the gun, be like, hey, Shazam, you dumb asshole, I did this the right way. That's the way to diet for a show, as opposed to, as soon as show prep starts, act like a fucking prisoner that's running away to the fucking river of hope and being like, fuck, and you slip on a rock and you're like, I don't give a shit, I don't need an ankle to run. That's how a lot of people diet for the show. It's just pure animalistic rage at some point, and none of it's thought through. Good luck convincing your fellows over there.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's that was very well put, and great analogies as well. And it was really interesting for me, as I mentioned, while I started the beginning of my mesocycle, basically, doing X amount of sets per week, and as I came to the last bit of the week, the first 2 weeks I could just smash out I was doing weighted pull-ups, so I could smash out. I was doing sets of 8, really nice, cleaned out, and as I got through, as I mentioned, the 5th week, I basically could only do 6 at one. I equated the volume over the time, but I went back and did neutral grip and after the deload, and it was just like I'm a new man, And the thing I found about taking the deload as well, I do push-pull legs twice a week. I like to train 6 days a week. Yeah, It's fantastic. I find it's a really good way to break up my training. And, I only did 3 days of the week instead of 6. I kept the volume a little bit higher per session just to equate, and I got some extra time off. But I found, at the end of the week, I was like, I need to go to the gym.
Totally.
Whereas before I was exhausted. And now it's like, I was motivated beyond anything to get that structure back, and I needed to get in there and just push hard. And this week has been absolutely fantastic. And it's just one of those things as well. If after a while that motivation to train, once you start getting that level of exhaustion, and it keeps going and it keeps going, it dwindles with time, right? And it just
Totally.
that makes everything harder. It makes not only the training, it makes the diet harder as well.
Totally, and a lot of people who don't know about volumes, predominance, and adaptations won't even equate volume after a while. I mean, I used to do that where I got so fatigued training for earlier shows that I would drop the overall volume just to be able to survive the workout.
Quick second, Mike, you're a little bit cracking up there. I don't know if it's the microphone or something. Is it plugged in fully? You eating it?
Yeah, it should be. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's just a little fuzzy.
Weird. Hold on a sec.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Still, I don't know if it's a little cracky. Can you talk in?
Weird. But yeah, nothing happened. I've been sitting in the same spot and everything.
Yeah, that's very strange. Maybe it's just my headphones, but perhaps not. Maybe I
Yeah.
just look like a fool on YouTube, and it's best kind.
Oh,
worries.
Yahoo. Well, I hope this is good enough quality to do something with.
Yeah, no worries. Well, you're clear. It's just the crackling, so it could be my headphones. So,
Cool.
we've completely extended the deload. I only have a couple more questions left. Something that, as I mentioned, I found huge gains in full range of motion this year. Before I was training, I thought, I was like, yeah, I'm doing full range of motion on things like chest press, like with dumbbells, and other movements like, pull-ups, etc., face pulls and things. But the difference I started this year, I remember reading on, I believe it was your Renaissance periodization page, like hypertrophy tips for chest. And I started watching some of the videos, and you'd come down basically touching the outside of your shoulders and pressing, and I was like, can't wait to go in next week and try this. And the difference that like couple of inches made just from stretching down further, I had to drop my weight by like almost 20 pounds. And I remember it like it was yesterday, because the stretch I felt was like nothing I felt before, and the difficulty of the exercise increased greatly. It was... Can you talk to a little bit to the people about like the benefits of range of motion and like the reason like weight is only a part of the deal, range of motion and the independent factors that come from being able to, stretch completely with your tissue?
Totally. It's funny because people will say that if you use more weight, you produce higher forces. That is actually not really the case if range of motion is not equated. So in the same range of motion, that's totally true. But if you use less weight, but you go through a full range of motion, for example, at the bottom of a chest press, right, when you go all the way down, and let's see if this works. If you go all the way down and you're super deep as opposed to just here at the bottom of a press, right all the way back here, your pecs are at a mechanical, much greater disadvantage. They have to produce more force even to lift less weight. They end up producing the same amount of force lifting less weight than they did lifting more weight through a smaller range of motion. So what ends up happening is at the muscle, the forces are largely the same, sometimes even higher with full range of motion. Number one. Number two, there is an independent hypertrophic stimulus of stretch under tension. So even if you equate for work, right? So if you do, 30 total reps like this, partials, and then you do 15 total reps of a full range of motion, if you get a full stretch, the 15 reps, even though volume equated, grow you more than the 30 reps you did that were half that range of motion, because stretch under tension is independently stimulative of hypertrophy. So now you have two benefit, or one not difference, right? No less force. And you have a benefit of stretch under tension. Another thing about full range of motion is it's so easy to standardize your training. How do you know if you got stronger on pull-ups if you don't go all the way down all the time and you don't pull all the way up? You don't fucking know. You could have just been cutting your shit, and you're just deluding yourself. And we see this shit all the time. Like, you spot someone in the bench press at the gym, and you're like, what's your best? And they're like, oh, I don't know, like 315. And you like spot them with 325, and they kind of just like, go halfway down and halfway up. And you're like, wow, they're like, oh yeah, this is a PR. And you're like, kind of in the back of your mind, you're like, well, how the fuck do you know that? You could have just cut it an inch both ways, and you actually got weaker. You have no idea. So the standardization is great. Because you're using less absolute load, your chance of injury is probably lower. people don't. This is not something you can immediately intuit, but if you've gotten pretty strong, it's easy to intuit. So, for example, if you ask me, do I want to full squat 400 pounds for reps, or do I want to half squat, 600 pounds for reps? Man, I don't want 600 pounds on my back. I really don't. You slip up with 600, you're going to pay for it. Slip up with 400, you're like, I can fix this, right? You lean over a little bit, lean back this way, that way. Another one is the total amount of loading, especially axial loading. So, for example, if you do partial range of motion bent over barbell rows, you're using a shitload of weight, and your back has to support a ton of that weight. There's downward pressure on your spine. That is a hugely fatiguing component of training. If you're bent over almost all the way over, and you're using a relatively light load because that's the only load you can use to produce the same forces at this point, how much really does that tax you? So, for example, I've done my PR for bent rows, and this is all from the ground to my tummy with no swinging, is 315 pounds for 4 sets of 10. It's scary to me to imagine what I would be bent rowing if I was doing it bro style. I mean, at least 5 plates or something. I don't want any fucking part of that. That's like deadlifting every time I bent row. That much fatigue. Fuck that. Like after 315, I feel like I deadlifted 315 as far as my back is concerned. That's not that much. But I don't want to do 455 pounds in the bent row. Why the fuck would I want to do that? And again, the injury risk, the total fatigue, and the growth you're actually missing out on. Shit, you know what? There's another benefit. Full motor unit recruitment. If you don't go through a full range of motion, you actually don't grow your entire muscle because there's parts of it that really don't contract all that hard when you are not using the whole range of motion. But when you use the whole range of motion, you get the full development. And something you might have picked up on, the pumps that you get from full range of motion training are like some kind of different pump than with partials. I mean, like you do a full range of motion dumbbell press, and your chest is like blowing the fuck up out of your body. And you're like, Jesus Christ, did I do something wrong? You can like fall asleep on your pecs or something. But with partials, you have to use more weight. It wears the joints down. You get a good pump, but you're like, man, that was heavy, and my joints hurt. I have people complaining to me all the time on Facebook and stuff about joint pain from training. I haven't had joint pain from training. I don't fucking know how long. I get joint pain from jiu-jitsu because people are trying to kill me all the time. But assholes, why can't you roll more cooperatively, So, but full range of motion training, people who squat all the way down, people who do pull-ups all the way down, they generally don't have joint problems. Who has joint problems? I can't bench press anymore because of my joints. You're like, show me what a bench press looks like, and they do the dumbest half rep you've ever seen. Well, listen, motherfucker, I can tell you why you're hurt. It's because you're doing way too much weight that puts way too much stress on your joints. You should be going through full range of motion, and you probably won't have any joint problems at all.
Yeah, no, it's a big issue. In fact, the back issue with bent over rows was one of my big ones as well. I mean, I was basically doing, a 45-degree angle shrug row variation, and I'm like,
deadlift.
Man, I can't target my lats sort of thing, and it was just terrible. And then, I started doing that full bent over, and my bent over row went down to about 165, 170 for the same amount of reps. And I was like, okay. And then, it was just terrible. In fact, only recently, I think it was 2 weeks ago, I was doing these rows, and I had these, kids doing them as well. And no joke, it looked like some kind of, bent over row, stiff-legged deadlift variation. And I basically was doing the same thing, and I was like, hey, guys, a little bit of pointer sort of thing. And they were like, yeah, sure. And they listened. They did the whole thing and put their ego in check and did it. And a week later, the same 2 kids were like, our backs are still sore from doing the same amount of work. And I was like, 100%. It's crazy. Yeah. And I've never got a great pump in my lats the first time I did full stretch. Same with that. And the exact same with lat pull downs, leaning forward, getting that full stretch in the muscle. I find I can get just as good a workout from lat pull downs as I can from pull ups now, as long as I focus.
The thing is that, full range of motion training is one of those things, if you're skeptical of it, especially if you have a good, someone like yourself who's been doing it for a while, has a good technique, show you how to do it properly. It's something you just don't go back from. A lot of people used to do partial range of motion, but now do full. It's almost never the other way around because, I remember what bent rows used to feel like when I did the stupid bro row. And everything hurts, your traps get a pump, and your lats maybe feel something, your lower back gets pumped, and you're like, oh, that hurts, and I'm tired, and I feel like I tweaked my bicep, and that's what rowing was all about. It's kind of for like deadlifting. Deadlifting doesn't feel great, no matter how you do it.
No.
But then you do rows properly for the first time, and you're like, my lats are going to blow the fuck up off my body, and I feel like I haven't even done anything yet. I'm not fatigued at all. I can just keep going.
No.
And when you feel an amazing pump, and you feel the target muscle, and you don't feel fatigued versus the complete literal opposite of that, you just don't go back from that. People, I've trained with some people who, since I've been doing full range of motion, tried to get me to do some kind of weird little little tweak. Like, okay, now you stop the squat just above parallel. I'm like, God damn it, this feels terrible. Fuck this,
Yeah.
and then you just never. And the thing is about full range of motion training, like people talk about, oh man, you got to really fucking hit shit hard, and it's tough to hit that muscle. Ever since I started learning good technique for range of motion training, my only problem has been fatigue management and recovery. It has not been stimulus. People are like, oh man, I can't get my quads to grow. I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Check this out. 6 sets on the leg press for a weight you can do 20 times on a first set, and then, 2 shy of failure. Go all the way until your knees touch basically right between, right in your armpits. Keep your lower back tight. Do that, and then 6 sets of high bar squats with your butt touching the ground every single time and your chest up. People don't walk away from that kind of workout. They crawl away from that shit. I don't even do that workout for most people because they think they're going to get fucking rhabdomyolysis from doing that shit. and they say shit like, I don't feel my quads. Oh, motherfucker, you will. I had a kid, so I almost never do this, but this guy actually asked me for advice at the gym. This is, like nowadays with as interesting as I look, most people just don't ever speak to me at the gym at all. But a guy was like, hey, man, I'm having trouble growing my legs, and I was like, say no more, fam. So
I've seen this. I think you posted about
that's
this.
right, I
I've
did.
seen this.
Yeah, I had him do 4 sets of full range of motion squats, and then 2 sets. I was careful, 2 sets of leg presses. I saw him in the gym 2 days later. I was like, how's your legs? He's like, he just did this for 5 minutes, and he was like, I didn't even show up to the gym for 2 days afterwards. I'm like, welcome to hell. But
Right.
the cool thing is that workout is so peripherally taxing. It hits your quads so much, but it doesn't centrally fuck you up. You can come in the next day and do back just fine. It's just your quads that are sore, as opposed to doing the bro squat workout where you squat halfway down and do, what a bro calls a leg press.
Yeah.
Exactly. Your joints are sore. Your mind is sore. While I'm ranting, the idea that most people have of what a leg press is some kind of fucking bastardization. I want to be like Moses to the leg press, where I take regular leg press technique to the fucking mount and I just smash the shit out of an idol or whatever the fuck. I don't know the Bible all that well, but anyway, you get what I'm saying. It's just it's atrocious. And people are like, yeah, the leg press is okay for my quads, but I really need leg extensions to feel my quads. I'm like, no, you dumb asshole. You have no idea how to leg press. You're doing the shit wrong. And what's baffling is how many good, big bodybuilders still do the leg press wrong, because nobody ever pulled them aside and taught them any better.
Yeah. Well, for a men's physique competitor, I'm actually very proud of my legs, and it was crazy because you just posted actually earlier about, training legs, and you were basically lying on the floor hey, this is me, and I was like, yeah, that was me yesterday, because it completely was. I basically did some split squats in a Smith machine and just got as far down as I possibly could, and I didn't use anything heavy at all, and got all the way up, and I just, after the first 2 sets, my pump was insane, and then I went and did 3 sets of leg press, and the weight wasn't anything crazy. It was just under 400 pounds, and I was doing sets of 12, but at 10, 11, I was basically 1 rep in reserve every time, and by the time I ended, my veins were going everywhere, and yeah, it was fantastic.
It's awesome, right? For how little destruction you have to put your body through joint wise to get a good muscle stimulus. It's really unbelievable, and that's one of the best things about full range of motion proper training is you can just buy yourself a whole lot of career time. Guys will say, oh yeah, man, I used to be able to train hard, but my joints are all fucked up. That just doesn't have to be the case. It just doesn't have to be the case if you do things correctly.
100%. And what I found too, when I first started training full range of motion, the first couple of weeks, I was just thrashed every single time. But after, a period of time, I still would get thrashed, just not to the extent I did at first. And today, when I first started, doing full range of motion with legs, I remember being terrified. I'd go into the gym and be like, shit, this is going to happen again today. I'm going to be crippled for 2 days. There's actually 16 sets of stairs at 16 stairs at my restaurant. So every time someone cooks food, I'm like, that's the reason I don't have to do. Yeah, that's why I don't have to do cardio, by the way.
There you go, for sure.
Yeah, which actually takes me to my last question. is there any benefit of doing cardio versus NEAT? So if someone's in the gym, doing high-intensity interval training, which I'm not a huge fan of in prep, or like low-intensity steady state or moderate intensity, is there any benefit of doing cardio, that style, breaking a sweat sort of thing, or me going out with my significant other and going for a hike on a Sunday and being active and like running up and down the stairs? Is the caloric deficit basically king in that case? It doesn't really matter where it's coming from.
First of all, please, you don't have a significant other. Come on now. Yeah. But on a serious note, here's the deal. NEAT is almost always better. It's superior. It is incredible. For a couple of reasons. One, you actually get to accomplish shit instead of staring at a fucking treadmill. Two, is it's a very low intensity and thus a very small risk for muscle loss. Three is it's very intermittent, so you're never accumulating a lot of fatigue at once. You ever walk off a treadmill after an hour and your legs are dead? They come back, but they're still dead. There's not a lot of good biochemical shit happening in your legs during that. But if you run around, sit down, run around, sit down, run around, sit down through the day, it really never accumulates to anything. There is one upside to formal cardio. The upside is trackability.
Yeah.
If you have to be sure you're burning a certain amount of calories, at least every day, you get on the treadmill and you do the work. Because with NEAT, there's a huge psychological push to reduce your NEAT completely, and subconsciously when you're dieting. So if you plan on NEAT having the only thing part of your prep is NEAT, you're going to run into a situation where it's going to auto lower. So if you're at work, if you're a waiter, you may be a go-getter right now. Closer to prep, you may be a little slower in moving around. There's a table over there that needs to be attended to. You're like, ooh, let me go to the kitchen first, pick up this one table's food, set their food down, and then go treat the next table, versus going out of your way twice to go to the table, then the kitchen, then the table, then the kitchen, right?
Okay.
So that stuff happens automatically. I think to counteract that, formal cardio is a good thing. What I would say is a mix of the two is best, keeping the formal cardio as low as possible. So maybe a typical setup for someone that has a high NEAT, if you work in an office or something, you just have to cardio your ass off, sorry. But for someone who has a high just daily expenditure from working or moving around, I would say in a 3-month situation, last 3 months of prep, first month, no cardio, NEAT only. Second month, 200 to 300 calories of cardio per session, 4 or 5 sessions a week. Try to keep your NEAT up as high as possible. Last month, whatever it takes to get in shape, to meet your body weight goals and to meet your physique goals. It could be 500 calories of cardio a day. It just could be 200 to 300 still. So that's one of those situations where I think a lot of people are resistant to adding cardio on principle, but then they need to get in better shape. They're like, no, I'm just going to diet harder.
Yeah.
You should just add some cardio, but it should pepper it in with as little as needed.
Yeah, I'm at the position right now that I'm basically nailing my 1% body weight a week, and it's coming fairly easily with what I'm consuming. And I plan that if it starts to duck down for more than a week or two, I'm basically going to have to increase or bring cardio into play at that point, right? Just to be smart about it. Actually, I completely forgot. If you have time for one more question,
sure,
it's actually from a viewer. They were wondering about peak week. What are your thoughts? You've done bodybuilding prep before? How did you approach it? And salt and water manipulation. I've posted before and ranted that I'm not a huge fan of water manipulation whatsoever, like supreme dehydrating, especially for like men's physique athletes. I don't think it's overly important. And certain like bikini athletes, like you don't really need to get super dehydrated, and taking water out kind of is counterproductive in a lot of ways.
So I got 2 things to say. First thing I have to say is the following answer is going to be pure shit because I'm not by any means an expert on peak week. Second thing is my friend Jared Feather is an exceptional physique athlete and actually an exceptional bodybuilder. He's an IFPA pro bodybuilder. Are you familiar with Jared Feather? Do you know who that is?
I've actually been in contact with him as well, trying to get him on, but he's in school right now pretty hard, and he's just about at peak week as well. So
fuck him. Tell him that he needs to come on your show. He actually is in his peak week right now. He looks ridiculous, by the way.
Absolutely insane. His depletion work. Anyways, I'm blown away.
He has a level of expertise on peaking that I will never have. I would encourage you to try to get him on the show for a whole episode on the peak week because he can really dive into this stuff.
I would love that, yeah.
I think that, and if he says he's busy, just tell me and I'll harass him into coming on your show.
Thank you.
So, yeah, you bet. So here's the deal. Fundamentally, you want, before the show, to ramp up carbohydrates to fill out, control your water so that you're not too hydrated, but hydrated enough, and manage your sodium so that you don't have so much salt that you're spilled over, but that's not so little salt that you lose intramuscular fullness. Mm-hmm. So the basic recipe that I've seen work, especially, so with drug bodybuilders, there's something else to be said for insulin and all this other stuff. It's a little bit different. Diuretics come into play. Yeah. It actually, to some extent, simplifies the process, but makes it 50 times more dangerous. For drug-free bodybuilders, it's a pretty straightforward approach. You can do a depletion, and that's totally cool, but just make sure, no matter what you do, that in the last 2 to 3 days before you show, you have more carbohydrate than you've had during most of your diet. During that time, you want to normalize sodium intake, usually, and make sure it's just not too high, but you don't want to make it 0 or something like that. So sodium on the low end, but still pretty decent. And you want to make sure that your water intake is pretty decent at the beginning of the high carbs to get those carbohydrates into you, but nothing excessive, especially in the day or night before, so that while the carbohydrates glycogen pulls the water into itself, you're not getting an excess amount of water to anywhere else, and the water basically leaves the subcutaneous space and goes into the intramuscular space, making you full and ripped at the same time. Mm-hmm. The big warning is against not just extreme manipulations, which usually don't work. The bigger warning is against manipulations you're not used to. Yeah. The peak week is not a time for experimentation. Yeah. You should have experimented with that numerous times throughout the prep, or just before the prep, mini versions of that. And playing the conservative angle almost always helps in peak week. Now, if you've been a competitor for 15 years, you know your body incredibly well, you can definitely push the envelope and have some success. But especially if you're a beginning competitor or an intermediate competitor, just do the basics. Don't violate the basics, and you'll be okay. Just play at the margins. Don't do anything stupid.
Yeah. Well, for me too, like when I plan on doing it, I don't really plan on doing anything crazy. Just basically fill out on carbs like you mentioned. Don't go too crazy on the water. Keep salt kind of like level. Because I found after I did my whole week of maintenance, 3 or 4 days past maintenance, basically what happened was I was full. I had crazy energy. Like I was getting really good separation, vascularity as well. And I just looked fantastic.
Totally.
And now it's starting to come down, like my glycogen's lowering a little bit and stuff like that. But that period right there was a great little toy that I got to witness firsthand. Like, okay, this is how I dealt with this. This is what I ate for this period of time. Okay, I can kind of see how my digestion's been, etc., etc. No bloating, etc. And it's
no different foods. No different foods. Whatever you've been eating on prep, that's what you eat to fill out with, because you get really fucked like that.
Yeah, 100%. Well, Mike, that is all the questions I have. We're just peaking an hour. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on to talk to me and my viewers. We all really appreciate it. There's a lot of people locally here that were really looking forward to this little YouTube cast. And hopefully, sometime in the future, I'll be able to get you on again to have a chat.
That would be lovely. I enjoyed myself greatly. Just out of curiosity, what's the weather like over there right now?
To be completely honest, we have one of the hottest days we've had the year. It is 26 degrees, but it feels like it's 34.
Oh, please. Please. We've had like multiple 32-degree days in Philadelphia, like 20 of them this summer.
I'm a lot more north than you are, though, sir.
I know. Right? I know. It's funny that that's your hottest day. Right? That's cool, man. That's cool. When do you guys get snow for the first time? Like October?
November. I'd say November.
Oh,
we have had it for Halloween before, but that's like, I can remember that like 25, 26 years ago.
Makes sense.
So, but yeah, winter is coming.
Yahoo.
Read the north, right?
For sure. All right. Well, dude, thanks for having me on. Thanks so much. And whenever you get a chance to post this, shoot me a message with a link, and I'll share the shit out of it.
Thank you very much, Mike. I appreciate that greatly. Cool. And please harass Jared, because I'm going to start doing the same to him again.
Perfect.
Cheers. Talk to you again.
Take care.
Bye.